Picture a race car. What's the first thing that comes to mind? For the vehicularly inclined, it might be a specific car, a combination of car and racetrack. For the less interested, you might picture a car with a big wing on the back and these crazy pieces of like carbon fiber or something on the front and sides. For some, it might be a specific time period when racing was just better. But the one thing that all people see when they think of a race car is the livery. I never really pieced it together till just a couple days ago, but racing liveries really are the most important thing about a race car. And some people might hear that and immediately dismiss anything I've ever had to say ever.
Alright, so the performance figures of the car just, doesn't matter? What about the history of it, man? You're telling me you don't care about, insert car here, if it just didn't have a cool paint job?
Doesn't even matter if the car wins a lot? Shh. The video just started, man. Just hold on, please. While a car's performance matters, and its history does too, unless you're really into racing, I highly doubt the first thing that comes to mind when talking about one is the engine configuration. While there will always be exceptions, the 787B, the Fulvia V4, any V10 race car ever, the standard for most people is not about technical facts like that, but their livery. If you couldn't tell from my last video, I'm a bit of a fan of them. But this awakening of mine didn't really start till I started working on that last video. During that time, I got back into racing games after being away for a little while, took up livery editing in Gran Turismo, and now we're here. I figured this was one of those things that people sort of had in the back of their minds, yet they never really talked about it. So I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to explain why liveries are so important and what they represent in the wider car culture using a couple examples from all walks of racing. Look, man, there's no avoiding this. Cigarettes are fucking cool.
You other guys, start walking.
I'm against tobacco companies in all forms. I even refuse to make tobacco liveries due to their historical, shadier than shady business practices, including advertising to children, lying about their ability to cause cancer, willingness to use child slaves more than other shitty companies, which is a hell of a feat, as well as getting doctors to claim that they're actually good for you. Do not smoke cigarettes, do literally anything else, because at least then death is usually either a little faster or a little more fun. But I'm not your dad or anything. Seriously though, out of the top 10 most iconic racing liveries in a survey, I'm willing to bet on average there's at least 4 to 5 different cigarette liveries in that list. Of course, you know the regulars: Marlboro, Rothmans, Camel, John Player Special. Some of the most iconic, famous, and beautiful paint jobs of all time, in any discipline. F1? Yup. Touring cars? Yeah, bro. Rally? Absolutely. I mean, but everyone loves talking about the big three. So why don't we talk about some of the less appreciated liveries from tobacco companies? Starting with the one that I found a lot of people surprisingly did not know was a tobacco company. Myself included until a couple years ago. The 555 Subies of the mid to late 90s are some of the coolest paint jobs of all time, as well as some of the most winningest on average. 3 constructor championships in a row from 95 to 97, with Colin McRae and co-driver Derek Ringer winning 1 driver's championship in that time span against his teammate Carlos Sainz and Tommy Mäkinen in the Rally Art Marlboro Evos. 555 had been sponsoring Subaru for only 2 years by that point, so it's safe to say that the return on investment came through pretty quickly. The sponsorship and livery design continued all the way to 2003, where they won 2 more drivers' championships with Richard Burns and Robert Reed in 2001, and Petter Solberg and Phil Mills in 2003, marking the end of one of the most iconic partnerships in racing history. To this day, my first thought when someone mentions rallying at all is the 555 Subies, specifically the Impretas of McRae and Solberg. When you look at the livery in depth, you realize that there isn't really much to it. You've got the base blue with some neon yellow-green stickers, and that's it. So why is it iconic? Well, one, it was driven by some of the greatest rally drivers of all time and won a lot of races. But the second reason why will come up for quite a lot of the upcoming liveries we'll be talking about. The logo is simply good. The stylized 555 with the color of the company contrasting the blue, it's really basic, but it's so pleasing to look at. It's not unlike a livery we'll be talking about later. The mid to late 90s Impretas will be remembered for a long time, not only because of their dominance, but because of how memorable that 555 sponsorship is. I highly doubt they'd be as revered as they are now if their livery went down a different path. Similar to the more detailed liveries of Toyota, Ford, and Mitsubishi. In a championship full of beautifully yet admittedly complicated designs, The basic bitchness of the Subi is why it stood out and is remembered far more fondly than their contemporaries at the time. I'm not saying the Castrol Celica or Repsol Escorts weren't good designs before you maul me to death, internet. I'm just saying the 555 Imprezas stuck out more compared to them. But even though I love the 555 Subis, they're not my all-time favorite cancer stick paint job. There's still one more tobacco company that I think have had better liveries than the rest of them all. Lucky Strike. Lucky Strike is owned by the British American Tobacco Company, as is 555, meaning that out of all the tobacco parent companies, they've got the best track record for logos in my books. Lucky Strike doesn't have the most extensive motorsport history, but god damn did they get it right whenever they sponsored a team. The most famous example, of course, being the BAR Honda F1 cars from the late 90s and early to mid 2000s, which never really did much of anything, besides provide a spot for Jensen buttons, but their other most popular example of motorsport sponsorship was actually on two wheels, being the title sponsor of Suzuki's bike racing program from 1990 to 1997, even winning an FIM MotoGP championship in 1993, with Kevin Schwantz being the main rider at the helm. The only other major sponsorship Lucky Strike held with another motor company was actually one of their earliest, teaming up with Mazda to sponsor their 757 Group C prototype car in 1986. Funny story about this partnership, a week before Le Mans in 86, the 757 caught fire while testing. So while they were able to repair all the critical stuff, the shell of the car was still a little charred. Toasted, some would say. What do you think one of Lucky Strike's signature slogans is? It's toasted. Bad omens, I tell you, bad omens. The car was toast in the race in DNF too, so there's that. What makes Lucky Strike liveries so good is the simplicity while still managing to add some flash to it. Cause while the 555 Subarus managed to still bring that flair to itself that every race livery needs, that was only because they decided to use two very high contrasting colors that just so happened to complement each other very well. Lucky Strike paint jobs managed to be very, very tidy and clean while still standing out from the rest of the pack. Mostly because of that perfect logo for sponsorship. Includes all the brand's colors, the name, and it's all in a circle that can be placed anywhere on the vehicle and still look good. It doesn't hurt that their font is also pretty good too. For me, above all the Marlboro, the Camel, the 555, the John Player Specials, all of them, all tobacco liveries, Lucky Strike will always be the GOAT tobacco sponsorship. And while I'm glad those companies aren't allowed to advertise freely anymore, it does hurt knowing that we'll never see a new Lucky Strike livery ever again. Even though we can no longer see the creativity that sprouts from the pure evil that is big tobacco, we got another industry that can still come in clutch for us while still ruining millions of lives. Remember how I brought up that whole ask a bunch of people what the most iconic race liveries are thing? Well, I'd say a solid 2 to 3 of the remaining spots would be filled by oil and energy companies. I would talk about probably the one that you're thinking of, Gulf, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think their liveries are pretty overrated. They aren't bad by any means, but they were definitely carried by the cars they were painted on. Mainly the GT40, one of the most prestigious Le Mans winners ever, the 917K, also one of the most prestigious Le Mans winners ever, and the F1 GTR. You can never guess what I'm about to say. Also one of the most prestigious Le Mans winners ever. Not a lot of companies can claim they've sponsored that many prestigious, truly legendary race cars. But there are other oil companies out there that have done some absolutely peak work on them, even becoming synonymous with the model they sponsored or even the whole brand. That's one way to show how liveries are so important, by the way. Becoming intertwined with another company to the point that you can't see them apart shows how much impact a livery can have on a brand. And I feel like one of the best examples of this is the Tom's Castrol Supras are probably some of the most recognizable liveries ever made, thanks in no small part to the game franchise that's popularized not only the car, but the entire JGTC in general, to a point that it's become a staple of both series. The Tom's Castrol partnership started in 1995, when the team was first formed and competed in the JGTC, and it ended in 2001. In that time, the team won 2 manufacturers' championships in the JGTC, led by Pedro de la Rosa and Mike Crum in 97. Funnily enough though, the cars fielded by the team weren't really all that admired beyond Japan until Gran Turismo 3 came out, featuring the 2000 version of the Tom's Castrol Supra, which isn't actually the championship-winning super iconic 1997 car that's so famous now. That didn't even show up until 2010 in GT5. So yeah, little useless history there. But regardless of which Tom's Castrol car it was, it still maintained that general design. White base with those swooshes of Castrol red and green all across the car, incorporating the Castrol logo into it a couple times, just timeless. While being quite a full looking livery, which I usually don't like, it still manages to retain an actual design rather than just being overly stickered over like a lot of modern racing liveries. Not to sound like an old piece of shit, but I've noticed that recently a lot of modern racing liveries don't really have a design language anymore. Rather, just they combine a bunch of colors and angles and they see what sticks and what doesn't. And while that's appealing to some, mostly car show hosts on GT7, I've lost so many fucking rounds to some bullshit like that, man. To me, that sort of design feels lazy. What happened to putting effort into these detailed liveries? You know, giving them character beyond being complicated as hell. The Tom's Castrol Supras pulled this off better than any race car in history. Better than their own Celica counterparts, which is why I felt they deserved to be gushed over in this video. As well as the fact that they're the staple car of Gran Turismo, which is always a plus in my book. The early days of the GT1 class of race cars were wild, with cars like the F1 GTE, CLKLM and GTR, even an XJ220. The class was pretty much just a watered down version of Group C, becoming a prototype class right out the gate. There are some pretty iconic and legendary paint jobs that sprouted from these initial seasons of the class, but there's one that I feel stuck out from the rest. Its design was so weird, like it was so different from the rest of the grid, that it immediately stuck out from the pack before it even started winning races. The Mobil 1 911 GT1 98, yeah, real fucking catchy, is the best version of the 911 GT1. It looked the best, sounded the best, and while it didn't perform the best, since that year was absolutely mauled to death by Mercedes, dominating the championship so bad that in 1998 everyone just quit. The GT1 98 still managed to win Le Mans because of an oil pump failure in the Mercedes. So if that's not your cue to never bet on racing, there you go. Don't bet on racing. The two previous generations of the 911 GT1 both featured similar paint jobs. Mobil 1's logo plastered over the car with these massive streaks of blue and red down the side, with the only difference being the actual shape of the strokes. But the livery everyone remembers when talking about the 911 GT1 is the 1998 version of it. The thin strokes of red and blue around the car that look like they're almost flowing. Almost like when you drop oil into water, which ExxonMobil is quite proficient at. It's honestly the only livery I've seen that was able to pull the whole strokes of paint everywhere look without looking overly complicated or like shit. Other than the Tom Castrol Supras and Celicas, of course. The funny thing is, from what I could find, Mobil 1 has never done this style of livery again apart from a one-off at Petit Le Mans in 2018 on some 911 GT3 cars. The rest of the primarily sponsored Mobil 1 liveries are all pretty tame, and some aren't even liveries, just sticking their logo as well as other company having theirs on a car. Kinda sucks. I honestly think it's a shame that they didn't continue with it for at least more than 1 year, because if the livery is this iconic and it only lasted one season, they missed out big time on creating a legacy of great liveries, which would have boosted their brand. There's a reason why people who don't smoke like me can name 3 to 4 cigarette brands off the top of my head. That effect could have happened to Mobil 1, but instead they went on with more typical mundane liveries, only occasionally popping out with some cooler than normal designs, like when they celebrated their 50th anniversary of racing sponsorship last year. To be honest though, the color is pretty much the only reason why this looks that good, which isn't a knock on the design at all, but I'm just saying it could have been better. I just wish Mobil 1 went back to that design language so we could have more iconic liveries that look like this, because I haven't seen one like it since. There's just one more overarching category I needed to talk about before moving on to the more specific examples of good liveries, but I feel like I saved the best for last. Contrary to what the law tells you, alcohol and cars go hand in hand with each other and have done so for a very long time. I mean, when an entirely new discipline of racing sprouts from alcohol production, that's how you know these two businesses are absolutely in love with each other. And in case you don't know, but most of you do since you're watching this, stock car racing, aka NASCAR, began in the Appalachians of the US with moonshine runners hosting races against each other using their shine cars. They'd find an open spot, they'd race on it for hours, and then they'd start upgrading their cars to be faster and faster to not only dodge the police, but also be more competitive in the races they held. This was the foundation that oval racing built off of, and now it's the most popular motorsport in North America, and one of the most popular in the world. Also, I am not an F1, IndyCar, or NASCAR supremacist. I'm a touring car and endurance supremacist, so I'm not getting involved in your arguments over what takes more skill, because everybody knows it's rallying. Apart from NASCAR being pretty much born from liquor, racing and alcohol are closely linked to each other because they were both historically very luxurious yet scrappy businesses. Racing was seen as being really prestigious, something only the bravest and most confident people would do. Or vice versa, the craziest, most batshit insane people. It wasn't really until Senna died in 1994 that racing actually became somewhat safe. Alcohol was also simultaneously seen as a very prestigious or insane business to be a part of, depending on which side of the law you were on. You either made bottles of alcohol that cost hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands, to the most upper class people in the world, or you made alcohol that could turn you blind and make you shit neon colors. During the 70s, tobacco sponsorship really began being scrutinized, which doesn't seem so compared to what we saw for like 3 decades after, but whatever. But with a hole left in the market, alcohol came to replace it, mostly in the American sector to start out, with the first major alcohol sponsorship being Miller, who sponsored IndyCar and NASCAR at the time. There had been alcohol sponsorships before, but it had never been as publicly televised as it was now. Also, come to think of it, I'm realizing that any sort of vice usually makes for a good sponsor in sports. Alcohol and tobacco for, literally every sport ever. Gambling for boxing. Honestly, I don't doubt that weed companies will start making some fire designs for some race cars soon. I think that's the next step for vices in motorsports. There's too many cars to choose from when it comes to alcohol liveries. And usually I don't care about the more famous examples and stuff like this. But how am I going to talk about alcohol sponsorships and not talk about Martini? Martini might be the best, greatest, most iconic racing sponsor of all time. The amount of classics their partnerships have created is insane. From their first sponsorship with Alfa Romeo, funnily enough, at the 24 Hours of Daytona in 1962, to their decade-long Porsche partnership, which birthed some iconic paint jobs on cars like the 917, 936, and some 911s that competed in both rallying and the Targa Florio, which I should probably make a video on one day if this channel ever grows. There's also their history in F1, starting in 1972 sponsoring the Italian-based Techno team, then sponsoring Brabham, and eventually Lotus up until 1978. Almost 40 years later, they came through to sponsor Williams and made some of the best liveries of the hybrid era so far. But of course, the partnership everyone knows about the most and is the most famous or infamous example of a racing partnership besides only Marlboro and McLaren is Martini and Lancia. Or Lancia. I don't know why I said it like that. Martini's first sponsored Lancia car was the Lancia Beta Monte Carlo, a Group 5 race car. They also sponsored the Group 6 LC1 and Group C LC2. While not a lot came out of the partnership results-wise, with only a couple wins shared between all 3 cars, you have to admit that these things look absolutely beautiful. Especially so when you realize they're stacked up against some of the most insane looking cars ever put to a racetrack. Could you imagine if there was a Martini sponsored car in Can-Am, like where the Chaparral 2J came from? That would be crazy. I'm guessing though that when you picture Martini and Lancia together, you're not thinking about these, but this. The absolute best rally cars ever made, and that's a debate you can have with my asshole if you want to disagree. The legend of Lancia Martini rally cars started in 1982 with the sponsoring of the Group B Lancia 037. I know Group B has been talked about a bunch at this point and is sort of becoming almost overhyped in a way. I also know that there are some people watching my video, specifically my friends, hi guys, if you made it this far, thank you, who have no idea how fucking insane it was. So to put it succinctly, the Lancia 037, along with many other Group B cars, have a KD ratio. I think that's all you need to know. 1 year after their partnership began, Lancia won the Constructors' Championship with the 037 and main drivers Walter Royal and Marco Allen. Or is it Allen? I've never learned. It was the last non-4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive car to win a WRC championship, beating out the almighty Audi Quattro S1. Shout out to Queen of Speed, by the way. In 1985, the Delta S4, their second Group B rally car, which is also in contention for being one of the fastest rally cars of all time off of pure pace, was introduced. donning the iconic design of Martini's cars. The base white with the striping of the red, light blue, and dark blue, with that crest of the brand letting you know, if you couldn't tell by now, that this was a Martini car. Once Group B ended with the death of Henry Toivonen and co-driver Sergio Cresto in a Delta S4, branded by Martini, the Group A regulations took over the biggest stage of rallying, and Lancia dominated. The Delta Integrale HF, branded with the most iconic version of any Martini paint job, even more so than the S4 and 037 in my opinion, absolutely ruined the class, winning the Constructors' Chip 5 times in a row. With Juha Kanukin, I could never say his fucking name. I learned about this guy years ago and I still can't say his name. Juha and Massimo Biazon, each winning 2 drivers' chips in those years. 87 and 91 for Juha, 88 and 89 for Massimo. But I'm willing to bet a large amount of people don't even know that Lancia was that dominant, just because of how many people have seen their liveries before knowing anything about them. The fact that the design has stayed the same since the early 70s shows how timeless Martini's liveries are. I don't doubt in 100 years from now, when some of the liveries talked about in this video are all but forgotten, Martini will still stand strong amongst the classics of racing liveries, even more so than Marlboro and Golf. In my opinion, they're the absolute greatest liveries ever, not only because they were some of the most winningest, but also because they were the prettiest, most well-designed, and most memorable ones ever. Since I spent so much time talking about Martini, and I still have some other things to talk about in this video, here's a lightning round of some other of my favorite alcohol liveries. Budweiser's NASCARs, Jack Daniel's V8 Supercars, Warsteiner's DTM M3s, Singha's 2016 and 17 488 GT3 car, and Jägermeisters of any kind. With the prominence of the big 3 in racing and racing history, it's always cool to see a livery that doesn't contain a brand from those industries become iconic or memorable. Now, a majority of my favorite paint jobs from this category come from the JGTC/Super GT. You know, the usuals, the Denso Sarge Supras, the Epson NSX, Ray Briggs' entire lineup, and of course, the Calsonic Nissans. A theme I've noticed with the most iconic JGTC/Super GT liveries though, is that most of them come from the GT500 class of the championship, leaving the less fast GT300 class's best works to sort of fall out of the spotlight. So for a change, I'll be talking about my favorite ever GT300 class livery, the Aspara Drink Aria Memia RX-7. If you've played Gran Turismo at all, Aria Memia is one of those brands that you definitely recognize, but you also don't know jack shit about. Kinda like Tommy Kara or ASL Garaya. I highly recommend this video if you want to learn more, by the way, about Aria Memia specifically. But to summarize, Aria Memia is named after the founder of the company, Isami Memia, a tuner who was very proficient in modifying rotary engines, having done so since 1974. The company was formed in 1976, and initially, it wasn't a racing team at all. Mr. Memia, or Memia-san, if you Japanese role players or actual Japanese people want to come for my head, was solely focused on developing better methods to extract performance from rotaries. A pretty uncharted territory for the 70s and even now to an extent. They only started competing in the JGTC to show the wider car community that rotaries could be a very viable alternative or even replacement to the typical ICE engine. In their very first season in 1995, they got 2 wins and finished 3rd in the GT300 class, immediately letting other teams know that they weren't exactly going to be on the fringe. However, over the next 10 years, the closest they came to winning the class was a finish of 3rd in 2001. The cars were always decently competitive, but reliability, bad luck, and very good competition limited their ability to place high in the championship. Until 2006, where after 11 years of competing, they finally won the GT300 class behind the efforts of Hiroyuki Iri and Tetsuya Yamano. Of course, winning it in that beautiful yellow and blue Aspara Drink livery. Except, the main color of the car, the bright yellow, wasn't actually Aspara Drink's doing. A drugstore chain in Japan named Matsumoto Kiyoshi was the primary sponsor of Aria Memia for 8 years before 2006, first sponsoring them in '98. That small amount of blue at the bottom that you see, as well as the most prominent sponsor placement on the car, the bottle, were Aspara drinks doing, with this livery first appearing in 2001, which to a lot of people sounds kind of crazy that a livery could last 5 years without really changing much, but that's something I noticed with Japanese motorsports. The sponsors and the team stay loyal, like really loyal. What makes the Aspara Drink RX-7 such a good livery is honestly a mix of both the colors and the sponsor placement itself. If the bottle had been placed literally anywhere else, I doubt it would have been as memorable. Like, I don't know what it is about sponsor placement over the rear fender specifically, or when it's integrated into the rear fender, but that look, it always gets me. It's like I have a soft spot for it. It immediately makes the livery at least 30% better in my opinion. There's no math to that at all, by the way. It has to at least 30%, at least. Like, look, here's an example with Gran Turismo. Tell me the Baskin-Robbins logo isn't better looking when it's integrated with the fender. That's what the Aspara drink bottle does for the RX-7. Out of all the simple liveries, this is up there alongside the 555 Subis as the best of them. I'd even say it's timeless. Unlike a lot of their Italian counterparts, Lamborghini's racing programs aren't anywhere near as popular or competitive as they were. Likely because at the start, Ferruccio Lamborghini himself supposedly thought motorsport was too costly and drained the company of its resources. But I believe in my mind that he thought it was stupid because Enzo took his stupid little car brand racing a bunch. Therefore, Lamborghini wouldn't even try to stoop down to his level. It's my own little headcanon, but it's probably because of the costs. It was only once a bunch of his engineers and some people at Dallara, which is a race car company to keep it short and simple, designed the prototype for the Miura, the P400, and gave it potential to be a racing platform that Mr. Lamborghini thought, maybe it isn't the worst idea to get our cars going around a track at 230 kilometers an hour. Fuck, Enzo had a good idea. Fuck, I hate that bum ass nigga. Even still, Lamborghini's racing division was practically non-existent for the first 30 years of the company's existence. They worked alongside BMW to make a prototype race car for Group 4 racing in the 70s, were too slow for deadlines, and they ended up having to give BMW full control of the project. The car that ended up being made from this partnership was the BMW M1. BMW's only real supercar. Yeah, big opportunity missed for Lamborghini to get some much needed money in their pockets, as the M1 became one of the most successful race cars of the early 80s, having an entire one-make series made for them to compete in that just so happened to also take place on the biggest stage in motorsport, Grand Prix weekend. Throughout the 80s and 90s, they kept dipping their toes into racing, having made a Group C car that didn't go anywhere, including Group C. They supplied engines for Formula 1 for 4 years, where the only notable thing I read in all of my research was right at the start. When I went to just get a general overview of things on Wikipedia, I found this excerpt. And probably most notably from this time, privateers took them racing in series like the JGTC, FIA GT World Championship, and they went to Le Mans a bunch too. From the JGTC specifically, we got to bear eyes on the J-Lock Diablo, which also wasn't very good, but it was a Lamborghini racing against Supras and Porsches and McLarens and NSXs. You can't really hate that, can you? I think the only genuinely impressive feat of racing from Lamborghini in this time, apart from what I'm going to talk about, was in the JGTC, now Super GT, where J-Lock managed to win the Suzuka 500 in the GT300 class with a RG1 Murcielago, the second set of racing Murcielagos, with the RGT being the first. The RG1 also took a win at the 1,000 kilometers of Catalonia in 2009, marking one of the few international wins the Murcielago would ever have. With the next generation of the racing Murcielago, the LP670 RSV, again, real catchy, we finally arrive at the Blancpain GT1 Murcielago. This was the most successful Lamborghini had ever been, winning 2 championship races and a qualifying race in the 2010 season, with Riccardo Zonta and Frank Cacciale being the ones behind the wheel. Of course, most people do remember this specific Murcielago because of its race wins, which is so incredibly rare for a Lamborghini to do, especially in an international series, that regardless of if it had a fire livery or not, it would have been remembered far more fondly than any other Lambo before or since then. But we're here specifically to talk about that livery and what makes it so great: the color and the decal. The decal. I think this is the only thing in this video that cannot be debated. That is the coolest, most creative decal ever put to a race car. Possibly the best decal for a sponsorship regardless of the sport. Like, come on, you get to see the x-ray of one of the most expensive watches in the world, since Blancpain is one of those fuck you money watch brands. The black and white, or noir et blanc, ooh, cool tie back to them being fucking Swiss, to match the brand's colors and name, the placement of it. Like, again, that integration into the fender and then having it placed on the front too, with the Blancpain word mark plastered on the front and sides. It's one of the most pleasing, cohesive paint jobs ever. I rarely use these big ass pretentious art gallery words, but how else am I supposed to describe this thing? I feel like there's nothing more pretentious in the world than a racing version of a car renowned for its lack of raceability from a brand that was reluctant to even make race cars at all, being sponsored by another brand whose prices for their product are so obnoxiously exuberant that the decal alone would probably make this car worth $1 gazillion. It's perfect. It's perfect. And it's among my top 5 all-time liveries, which I should probably give the list of now. Out of all the liveries in racing history, which ones get the coveted spot of this dumbass's top 5? There's an honorable mention for the Asparaginc RX-7 because the list is pretty tight and I just couldn't justify putting it above the other cars in the top 5, but it still deserves to be among the upper echelon. Definitely my 6th favorite as of right now, but that flip-flops a lot with a bunch of other liveries throughout history, so yeah. In 5th place, the Mobil 1 GT198, probably still one of the best GT1 liveries of all time, which is a hard class to be the top of when you're alongside the Gulf McLaren and D2 CLKs. In 4th place, the Lucky Strike BARs, probably my favorite all-time F1 livery, even above the iconic Infiniti Red Bulls, Camel Williams, and yes, the Marlboro McLarens are included. Lucky Strike's brand colors and logo specifically lend themselves so well to motorsport sponsorship, and again, it's still a shame that it's practically impossible to ever see a new one. It's for the better. Tobacco companies, as I said earlier, ultra shitty. But luckily, Gran Turismo's livery editor can allow me to witness the hypothetical beauty of Lucky Strike's branding on other cars without really causing real life harm. So I think I'll be fine. I've decided to put the Castrol Supras and Celicas in 3rd, with my ties to Gran Turismo probably being the biggest bond I have to any game ever. The Castrol branding is something that'll always stick with me. Not only are they icons to the JGTC, they're icons to the racing game genre and racing in general. One of the most unforgettable designs ever, and even if you don't like it, the Castrol cars will always stick out in your mind. And in 2nd place, we've got the Blancpain Murcielago. Probably, again, one of the most fitting sponsors for a car ever. That alone makes it one of my favorites. But the fact that the livery was so well done, so tidy, and the car it was on managed to win races when it was known for not doing that, it's damn near perfect, man. I love the Blancpain Murcielago. Still has the best decal in racing history, even more than the first place livery's main feature, which we'll get to. And it'll always stick out in my mind among the crazy era of GT1 racing and all its icons. But no matter how good of a livery it was never going to be first place. I think it's pretty obvious to most that the Martini liveries are the best liveries of all time, which is why they take up my spot for first. Managing to consistently be the prettiest livery in its series whenever it showed up, as well as one of the most winningest, ignoring the Williams sponsorship, automatically puts it in contention for top 3 all time amongst most people. What makes it first for me is that it practically stayed the same, using the same designs for 40 years, and it still managed to be the best looking livery whenever it raced. From Group 6 to Group B to F1, it always stuck out amongst the most iconic paint jobs in history. I don't doubt that if Martini sponsored an F1 car during the golden age of the tobacco era, it'd firmly be the best livery ever designed in the eyes of many. And even though it didn't, it still is the best in the eyes of many, me included. So there we go. The all-time greatest livery ever is all of Martini's sponsorships. No matter which era, which car, which series, it was the best and still is the best to this day. There was one last category I wanted to talk about. Fictional liveries are a pretty weird thing to talk about, but I think they're almost equally as important to the car community as real ones are. I mean, more people probably recognize some of them than real liveries. There are 2 main examples I'm thinking about, and you could probably guess them, but I'd like to talk about them anyways. I am not an anime or manga guy. Like, at all. Out of anyone in the modern world, I might know the least about anime and manga simply because I never got into it. But there's one that I've never even watched or read that still holds weight to me, simply because I love cars, and that's Initial D. This video is already long, so I'm going to keep this short. Initial D is about a guy named Takumi delivering tofu, becoming the greatest toge driver / drifter ever. He goes up against opponents who use the absolute cream of the crop. STIs and Evos, Skylines and Supras, Sylvias and Civics. And what does Mr. Fujiwara drive? An AE86. Or to put it more succinctly for my friends in real life who don't know shit about cars, a Toyota Corolla. And he wins. He wins a lot. Which, yeah, you can see why it became so famous. Whatever car the riders would have given him would have become an icon in the community for sure. But the AE86 donning the Tofu Shop's livery has spread beyond the world of anime and manga, beyond the world of cars in general. It's the best underdog probably ever, or one of the best underdogs ever, and that's the one theme that's consistent within the books and show. Nobody expects this kid in a Corolla with tofu delivery on the side to be as good as everyone says he is, and then he blows them out of the water. This whole gutter technique or whatever the fuck it is. The story itself is what made it famous, but the car, and more specifically, the livery on it, are what made it truly iconic. The white and black with the text on the side, it's pretty much just a pizza delivery car for people who live in America and Canada. Like, it's so simple that it's easy to remember, but memorable enough compared to the rest of the cars in the series to stick out and become the hero car of the entire car community. I highly doubt if the car had just been a plain color, or even a plain black and white two-tone, that would have been as iconic as it is. The livery is at least 50% the reason why Takumi's car is as remembered as it is. But there's another car from fiction that's almost 100% remembered because of its livery. I mean, honestly, instead of it, I should be calling it a he. Lightning McQueen's Rusty's paint job is probably the most famous livery ever, because not only is it well known within the racing community, he's the main character in one of the most successful movie franchises of all time. And throughout all his movies, he kept sporting that Rusty's 95 paint job. What's so special about Lightning's design, apart from the fact that he's a car that has eyes and talks and has flaws and a character? What's so special about him? Well, for one, the colors. Since Lightning's bright red and orange design goes well alongside Chick Hicks's green and yellow, as well as King's bright blue Dynaco scheme, it differentiates the three of them, with Lightning being the most memorable, of course, because it's his movie series, but also because of his decals. The lightning bolt on his side with the Rusty's patch on the hood and the sides as well, along with the sticker bomb as seen on the stock cars at the time and before, it all meshes together really well. There's not much to really say about his livery other than you can show a non-racing fan his design, not even the car, just the design. Just scrape the paint off, place it on the ground, show it to somebody who doesn't know shit about cars, they'll recognize it. If that's not a damn near perfect livery, I don't know what is. So there we go. The best and most important racing liveries of all time. I mean, a car could be one of the most successful in sport, and if it looks like shit, it's not going to be remembered as much as its predecessors. Modern Red Bull. And that's a shame, because all that hard work put into developing the car, and it all gets forgotten because you didn't hire an arts guy to make a paint job for you? Come on. Do better, Red Bull. Specifically, Red Bull. Fuck you. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day, night, morning, afternoon, whatever. Just have a good one.